Good morning, everyone. Thanks to all of you for joining our webinar today on ERA 2025 progress. Good to see so many of you joining. We still see people entering this virtual meeting, so perhaps we give people a bit of time to still join, but we won't be starting too late. At least already we have a good attendance. All right. While the counter is going up, let's already give it a good start to make best use of everyone's time, of course. So again, a warm welcome to all of you for joining today's webinar. Thanks for your interest in the ERA 2025 progress, previous and next editions to come. My name is Edwin Hazen. I'm head of section on system development at ENTSO E, and I'll be the moderator of today's event together with my colleagues here also as presenter today. Stakeholder interaction, of course, is a key element of the entire ERA process. So the intention of today's webinar is really to update you all how work has been going so far, where the status is at the moment, which elements the colleagues, the experts are working on at the moment in terms of modeling, methodology, scenario assumptions after the consultation with a few months ago, and provide you some clarity about which challenges we're taking on at the moment still in an open way. It's an opportunity for all of you, of course, to also ask questions, share feedback as well. The ERA is a very complex TSO exercise, but it's not only a TSO exercise, it serves the wider community, authorities, market participants, and so on. So really the intention is for us to make sure that via this webinar and other webinars to come, we have a transparent process and you can give us guidance on how we are advancing and where we can further improve. Without further ado, before going to the crux of today's webinar, I want to share a few housekeeping rules, which you also find here on the slide, of course. So for everyone's information, today's webinar will be recorded and you will have access to the recording and the slides soon after closure of today's event. In case you want to share any views, any questions, we do, of course, hope you can do so. Please do not make use of the chat functionality in Teams itself, but we revert you to the Slido page, which you find here on the screen, the numerical code and the QR code to have easy access. You will find the code and the QR code still in the slides to come, so if you miss it now, you can still have it later on. If you want to raise a point, ask a question, we kindly ask you to indicate, of course, your affiliation, your name, so we know who it comes from. And of course, you have a chance to look at other people's questions and upvote anyone you appreciate to hear a view on from us as well, of course. Based on that, we'll make a selection of the questions upvoted to make sure those prominent questions are being tackled by the colleagues here presenting today. If you go to the next slide, of what to expect in the coming hour in terms of agenda. So I will quickly pass on the word to Daniel Huertas, who is the co-convener of the ERA 2025 work, to give a bit more introduction on what is happening so far and what ERA is all about. And then we have three more topical elements for you on weather scenario selections, risk aversion approaches, and revenue-based EVA approaches, which will be tackled by Laura, Niels, and Oscar, respectively, who are some of our leading experts on the ERA 2025 progress. Again, if you have any question, please make use of the Slido functionality and take a look at the questions other colleagues have been raising. We'll definitely make sure we have some time available to take your questions. And given we want to have a short, concise, and focused webinar, we plan to take all the questions later on after those topical presentations. So thanks again for all your interest. And without further ado, I pass on the word first to you, Daniel, to give a bit more the background of the ERA work itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. The audio is working fine. So indeed, Pia, please, next slide. Thanks for the introduction, Edwin, and thanks you all for joining. So indeed, I will go quickly through main background slides. Probably you'll follow some of our webinars. You will recognize some of them. Still nice to kind of remind ourselves the background. So as you probably know very well, ERA is one of the ENTSO E legal mandates, and this product, it is basically tailored to assess the security of supply of the electricity European system, especially considering the rapid changes that our system is undergoing in the last years regarding the different aspects that they are challenging and pushing the energy transition. So its main role is to support decision-making towards secure, affordable, and sustainable energy transition, energy system for European citizens and industries. as such, is a pan-European monitoring assessment based on probabilistic analysis according to the prescriptions of the methodology and the European Clean Packet Regulation. We will present you today main elements of continuous evolution of ERA 25. Of course, this product builds on the methodology and the previous editions, and every time we both try to build on the previous knowledge and keep our robust tool up to date, but also improve it as continuously as necessary. It's very important to remind that the main purpose of ERA is to be an effective tool for identification of adequacy risk. And last but not least, to do this assessment, you need a lot of data. And the data we use is a combination both of pan-European reference data emerging from each of the member states, reflecting the best estimate view of the system, as well as some common data sets, for example, the climate database, which is, let's say, procured by Copernicus and others. So this is a combination of the main elements that we put forward. And next slide, please. So again, in concrete, the role of this forthcoming ERA will be, as any other ERAs, to assess the adequacy risk for the what we call the medium term, 10 years ahead. And then by NDP, we speak about long term, which is years later. That's why we call this medium term. For ERA 25, the pivotal years we will consider are 28, 30, 33, and 35. You see that compared to the previous ERA, the year 2033 is new. The other years have been assessed in the previous ERA. Again, as repeating, we aim to inform decision makers and stakeholders at large on the status of adequacy. There is a very specific and important role of this information of ERA regarding the introduction of capacity mechanisms by member states, which is also reflected in the European regulation and the ERA-approved methodology. And last but not least, of course, ensuring the adequacy of the European system will strengthen the European system at large, also to fulfill the European targets, notably the way to net zero and different targets which are put forward, together with other activities that ENTSO is also supporting regarding planning of the grid and others. So the last slide from my side, where it speaks explicitly about what we want to present you today. Next one, Pia, please. So in the framework of the continuous improvement, we would like to present you the improvements we are aiming towards the economic viability assessment, which is one of the integral parts of the assessment itself. My colleagues Laura will present you our work improvements regarding the weather selection methodology that we use. Niels will present you our work on regarding enhancement of risk aversion. These two are both economic viability, let's say, frameworks that we have currently. We have both a cost base and a revenue base, which are both reflected in the European methodology, in the ERA methodology. Today, so we will present you these two elements, which are relevant for both, and also we would like to give you some details about the, let's say, second method, the revenue base, and the continuous improvement that we are doing there. Since we have previously presented you already details about the base, so today we would like to spend a bit more time speaking about the revenue-based method. And with that, I think it's time for me to give the floor to my colleague. So I guess Laura will go now. Thank you. Sorry, apologies.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for saying this thing, yeah. Thanks, yeah. So indeed, there's a lot of things, of course, ongoing in the ERA. At least we made a selection of topics today's webinar. Basically, just as you said, Daniel, in a previous workshop, stakeholders, but also discussions with Acer. Thanks, Arthur, for joining us. I realize now I omitted to introduce you at the start of the webinar. Sorry for that, I was a bit taken on speed. But many thanks also to yourself for being available in today's webinar. Thanks also for the good collaboration over the past years on this ERA progress. And thanks for sharing a few thoughts about how Acer looks at the ongoing ERA 2025 work and whatever is ahead of us. So happy to pass the floor to you, Arthur. Many thanks.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Thank you, Edwin, for introducing me. And thank you also, Daniel, for introducing the workshop. We believe it's very important. My name is Arthur Lynch. I'm in charge of ERA 2025 on Acer side. I would like to reiterate and repeat our thanks regarding the ERA 2024 process. As mentioned by Daniel, it has been approved recently, 1 week ago. This is a really great news, and we believe that ERA 2025 will build on the robust ERA 23 and ERA 2024 in order to have an approved ERA 2025. Regarding our expectation of ERA 2025, the next slide for the first topic. The first topic we would like to highlight regarding our expectation of ERA 2025 is an increased transparency and clarity. We believe by ensuring clarity, it allows creating a space for dialogue, inform stakeholders so that they can give info feedback and inform input to the method and the assumption of the ERA 2025. This would allow validating those stakeholders' input and help build on this feedback in order to continuously improve the ERA versions. This is especially important considering that, as mentioned by Edwin, ERA is a complex object with a lot of different assumptions and a lot of different input, and having clarity is essential for the stakeholders to understand what is going on and where does the adequacy output come from. We have specific recommendation for suggestion for the ERA 2025. The first one is refinement of the ERA report with some more detailed description of the underlying assumption of the model used by ERA. And the second one is that ENTSO should provide a release note to every future ERA version so that it's easy for stakeholders to understand which input were modified, which assumption maybe was changed, or whether the model was fixed or there has been some improvement regarding the modeling of the pan-European power system. Also, with this release note, it will be good that for each change there is at least a description by ENTSO regarding how the change impact the model, so that a better understanding of the evolution of adequacy series between different ERA versions. If we can go to the next slide. The second point that we would like to highlight for ERA 2025, and this has been repeatedly highlighted in previous ERA decision, it's related to consistency. There is, as you know, there is two modules in the ERA. One is the investment module, the EVA. One is the adequacy module, the ED. And there has been repeated inconsistency between the adequacy outcome of the two modules. This is linked to the necessary simplification of the EVA model, considering that it is a more complex model with more decision variable when optimizing the system. We between the two modules is key to have a more robust ERA, especially as it ensures that the investment signal in the EVA are properly reflected. Hence, our recommendation on this topic is that we call for a steady consistency improvement, and this is a topic that we will scrutinize and will also discuss with ENTSO how to better have a consistency between the two modules. Regarding the last topic that is on the next slide, we wanted to mention also the link of ERA 2025 with the ongoing ERA streamlining process. As you may know, the streamlining of the methodology is underway with the public consultation having already started. ENTSO is to submit the draft amendment in October, and the amended methodology will be approved by Acer in January. What does it mean for ERA 2025? It means that the changes of the ERA methodology out of scope for ERA 2025 Hence, there is an exception expectation for ERA 2025 that there is no major changes that are brought to the methodological aspect of ERA 2025. Any discussion regarding the use changes or methodological changes for ERA must be discussed in the streamlining process. And yeah, so regarding ERA 2025 expectation are pretty simple. We would like that there is a focus on the transparency and the consistency aspect. Last point, maybe we would like to view the informed stakeholder to have you say regarding the ERA streamlining process. Please give your suggestion. What aspect of the methodology should be simplified? What aspect of the methodology also will need to be better represented in the ERA? And we believe that your feedback will help the ERA to continuously improve. That was it for my presentation, and I will give back the floor to ENTSO, his colleague.
Excellent. Thanks, Arthur. Thanks for indeed highlighting what was in the decision recommendations you said, which were published last week. The many points which we discussed extensively already over the past years. Thanks also for putting the emphasis on the next eras to come. We talk now about ERA 2025, what is happening there, which are the ACER priority points. But of course, it's an annual product, many more eras to come in the coming years. So I take the opportunity to refer everyone attending here again to also a second webinar we have planned today on the ERA methodology update to inspire and guide the next editions to come. If you're interested, please do register, if not already done so, of course. Then many thanks. Then we'll pass on to, as said, 3 more topical elements about what is happening in ERA 2025. Happy to pass to Laura to share some words about the weather scenario selection approach in this ERA 2025, and to remind everyone again here, everyone attending, if you have any questions about what Laura and the colleagues will be presenting or anything else you heard so far, by all means, do please add your questions in the Slido, of which you will see the link in this slide and the next slides to come. Many thanks, and passing over to you, Laura.
So thanks, Edwin, for the introduction, and hi from my side to all the stakeholders that are joining us today. So as Edwin already said, I will continue then with the presentation with the improvement regarding the weather scenario selection approach in ERA 25. Yeah, I would like to start first with a bit of background why we actually need to select a new subset of weather scenarios for the EVA in ERA 25. And the reason why we need a subset of weather scenarios is because the EVA model is quite complex. This means that considering the full set of 36 weather scenarios coming from the PECD, so the Pan-European Climate Database, can be a bit challenging in terms of computational effort. And why do we need to select actually a new subset of weather scenarios compared to ERA 24? We will actually analyze this in more detail in the following slides, but the main reason is that there have been data collection updates and model refinements since the weather scenarios for ERA 24 were selected. Which is the goal actually of the weather scenario selection approach in ERA 25. So same goal as we already had in ERA 24. So this remains the identification of a representative subset of weather scenarios, and the approach that has been applied to reach this goal in ERA 25 is based on the so-called impact-based approach that was already adopted in ERA 24, but we have implemented some improvements that I will explain in more detail in the following slides. Let's move to the next slide now. And before describing this improvement, I would like to make first a quick recap of what the impact-based approach is. So I will not go into detail. Unfortunately, we do not have enough time in the webinar today for that, but I wanted to inform you that you can find a detailed description of this approach in the slides and the recording of the methodology webinar of last year, so of ERA 24, and of course also in the ERA 24 report. So feel free to take a look at that also. So let's explain a little bit in detail. So the impact-based methodology, so the steps, the different steps. So the methodology consists of 4 different steps. So first, we need to define a criteria dataset that will allow us to identify or to qualify a subset of weather scenarios as representative of the full set of weather scenarios, in this case of the full set of 36 weather scenarios. And in ERA, what we use are revenues from economic dispatch runs as criteria, because actually revenues are the main driver of commissioning, decommissioning, lifetime extension, and also mothballing decisions in the EBA model. The second step is that we need to generate the weather scenario subset, that is the possible combination of weather scenarios. And after we have generated the subset, we need to define the metric to score those weather scenario subsets. And for scoring, what we applied is the so-called Wasserstein metric. That is the distance between each subset of weather scenarios, and the full set of 36 weather scenarios is measured as the area between their cumulative distribution functions. I know maybe it's a little bit difficult to picture this without any figure, but as I said before, please take a look if you want more information about this to the webinar of last year, and also to the ERA 24 report. And the last step is after calculating the Wasserstein distances, we need to select the most representative weather scenario subset, and the most representative weather scenario subset is the one that minimizes the sum of the Wasserstein distances. So the one that is the closest, we can say like that, to the full set of weather scenarios. So let's move now to the next slide. So now I would like to present the improvement in the weather scenario selection approach for ERA 25 compared to ERA 24. And first of all, and probably the most relevant improvement, is that in ERA 25, we are using now final ERA 24 post-EBA economic dispatch net revenues as criteria for the weather scenario selection. In ERA 24, what we use were preliminaries, not final, and we use pre and not post-EBA economic dispatch results. And actually, the use of this kind of post-EBA economic dispatch results improves the expected representativeness and also consistency with the revenue distribution of later ERA 25 post-EBA economic dispatch runs, because we are taking into account already commissioning, decommissioning, lifetime extension, and also mothballing decision when selecting the most representative weather scenario. And in addition, in ERA 25, we are now considering all target years and also all forced outage samples for the weather scenario selection, which also increase, of course, the representativeness and also the robustness of the weather scenario selection approach. In ERA 24, we only use the target year 2030 and a single forced outage sample for the selection of the most representative weather scenario subset. So let's move now to the last slide regarding the weather scenario selection approach. Last but not least, because we can take a look here at the preliminary selection of 3 and also 6 representative weather scenarios in ERA 25 for the EBA model. And first of all, I want to explain a little bit the figure that is presented here in this slide. So you can see in the y-axis the ERA 24 post-EBA economic dispatch net revenues for the full set of weather scenarios. That will be the first column in blue. And just to remember, this ERA 24 post-EBA economic dispatch net revenues are the criteria that we have used for the selection this year in ERA 25. And we can also see these revenues also for the selected weather scenarios in ERA 24. That will be the second column here, so the one that is shown in gray. And for the preliminary 3 and 6 weather scenario selections in ERA 25, we can also see these revenues, and these are the third and the fourth column here in the figure, which are here represented in green. So I also wanted to add that the yearly net revenues that are shown here are average over the 4 target years as we consider in ERA 24, also over 50 study zones and the 15 forced outage samples that we consider. The orange squares here in the figure represent actually the average values of the different subsets that are here presented. And the yellow triangle actually shows the weighted average that was applied in ERA 24. So regarding what we see regarding results, regarding conclusions, we can see that the average values of the selected 3 and 6 weather scenario subsets in ERA 25 are actually quite well aligned with the full set of the 36 weather scenarios, so here shown in blue. And also, in addition, we can see that both preliminary selections in ERA 25 appear like more balanced compared to the selection that we did in ERA 25. For example, the selections in ERA 25, they do not include extreme weather scenarios such as the weather scenario 25. As a remark, this weather scenario was actually selected in ERA 24 because initially it did not present any extreme revenues when considering the pre-EVA economic dispatch runs. This selection was based on these pre-EVA runs last years. So actually this highlights the importance of the improvement we have implemented in ERA 25 regarding the consideration of post-EVA and not pre-EVA economic dispatch results for the weather scenario selection. Now I am at the end also regarding my part of the presentation regarding weather scenario selection. So thank you very much for your attention. And I will now give the floor, I think, to Edwin again, and then Niels.
Super, thanks, Laura. Thanks for giving a crisp, concise insight on how this element has been improving for ERA 2025. The weather selection approach has been a topic heavily debated, I remember, with experts from the wider community in the first ERA editions, and also heavily discussed with Acer over the past eras. So good to see how progress is being made, and appreciate views from anyone here attending about the next steps Laura just outlined. So again, any questions, any reactions on this topic, or whatever comes next, please don't hesitate to add them in the Slido page itself. So thanks, Niels, also for taking up the next topic on risk aversion, and passing on the floor to you then. Many thanks.
Thanks for the intro, Edwin, and also from my side, hello to everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar. I'm starting with a brief intro on why did we want to improve the risk aversion implementation in the ERA 2025. Basically, we have seen in the previous ERA cycles that we had a lot of capacity expansion, which was heavily relying on very few scarcity hours, and we received the feedback from multiple stakeholders that this is cannot be seen as an appropriate investor behavior. In the context, it's also part of our responsibility in the ERA method that we have a proper consideration of risk management towards price spikes. So that's why this is relevant for us. And the goal with the improvement we have done this year is that we basically have a better or more appropriate investor behavior in the EVA, reflected in particular related to scarcity prices. And the two approaches that I will present on the next slides, which we came up with, are on the one hand side an update of the already existing hurdle premium, which have already been implemented in the previous ERA cycles, and on top of that, the establishment of a reduced revenue cap in the EVA. And then we can go to the next slide. In the last, the next slide, yeah, okay. Thanks. Complementary to what I just mentioned on the previous slide, we also have some additional insights now that we collected in an investor survey that was conducted in the context of the ERA methodology. And I have the answers we received there, which are also related to the risk aversion modeling. The first question on the left dealt with the question, which approaches are usually used to account for risk in their investment decision. We see that a large number of investors here responded that the hurdle rates, which is already part of the ERA, plays a big role, but we also see that there are some additional elements like the value at risk, which is taken into account by quite a number of investors. And the second question that we were asking was particularly related to scarcity pricing. It's the question on the right here, where we basically asked to what extent the investors take these scarcity prices with a very low probability into account in their investment decision. And we see that some of the investors responded that they take these low probability, high impact prices into account. However, an even larger number of investors responded that they either do not take these scarcity prices into account or only partially. This again supported us to improve our risk aversion modeling approach. With that, we can go on the next slide, where we'll go into the two different approaches we came up with. First, on the left side, the first approach we are investigating, we're planning to have, is the so-called CARA-based risk premium. It can be seen as an update of the hurdle premiums we already have in the model. And the CARA-based risk premium is based on the so-called constant absolute risk aversion approach. It's using utility functions in order to take into account the risk of investors. And what we have done here is that we use the revenues that we have obtained from the ERA 2024 models for the expansion candidates. And based on this, we calibrated the hurdle premiums with the CARA-based approach. So that we have obtained the new hurdle premiums, which you can also see on the bottom here for ERA 2025. So we have 6.9% for CCGT and 9.9% for OCGT. Compared to last year, you can see this is a slight increase, and it's an improvement because we have now derived these values purely on consistent ERA revenues. For the other technologies, such as batteries and also existing thermal plants, we did not update the hurdle premium, so we still use the old hurdle premium, also because those are less relying on these very rare events of price spikes. Then the second approach we are investigating is the so-called revenue cap adjustment. What we are doing there is that we are analyzing available price curves and determining certain extreme percentiles with a very low likelihood, which can be excluded from the investor's decision. We used here two different data sources. We did the analysis based on historical price peaks we have seen in the day-ahead market, and we also used the data or the price curves that we obtained from the ERA 2024 model and did basically the same analysis. Finally, we decided to use the data from the ERA 2024 model because we believe this is a better prediction of how the system is going to change in the future and how the prices are going to change better compared to historical price occurrences. And below here, you can see the revenue cap that accordingly results for the EVA for the different target years in the table. The first one, the day-ahead market cap, is basically the market cap that is valid in the day-ahead market in the respective target year, and the EVA revenue cap is the reduced cap that applies for the investment decision. And on one of the next slides, I will then also go a bit more into detail how we came up with these values. So Pia, please, one slide further. First, some insights on the first approach, the CARA-based risk premium. What is the idea here? You can see on the left, on the x-axis, you have the net present value of an asset risk, of a risk-free asset, versus the net present value of an asset which includes risk consideration. If you now have a risk-neutral investor, you see the orange line or the yellow line, where basically the NPVs are identical. However, as soon as you have risk aversion implemented in the model, the net present value of an investment which includes risk is lower than the net present value of a risk-free asset. And in the literature, you find different assumptions which can be used for the so-called alpha parameter, which basically defines how strong the risk aversion is. And we used here a value which is assumed for moderate risk aversion, which can be seen as an average investor. Pia, if you can click please once, then we can see the graph on the right. And once again, please, so we can also see the numbers. Exactly, thank you. Basically then, what was done, we took the data from last year, the revenues that we obtained for the expansion candidates, which you can see exemplary here in the picture, for 36 different weather scenarios. And based on these revenues and the alpha that we have predefined, we then extrapolated the new hurdle premiums for ERA 2025. And these are the values that I showed you in the previous table. This on the Cara-based approach. Now we can go to the next slide, and I close with the insights on the revenue cap adjustment. On the left side here, you can see the analysis we did on the ERA 2024 price occurrences we had from our model. You can see for the different intervals of prices, the number of observations and the cumulated probability in the third column. And what you can see here is that the more you go to the higher prices, you have a very low probability that these ones occur. And we have set a threshold here of 0.15%, meaning that the prices that occur with a likelihood less than 0.5% are not anymore taken into account by the investor. And this is, statistically speaking, equivalent to assuming that hours or revenues which occur in less than 13 hours in a year are basically not taken into account or are reduced taken into account. The value that we then obtain with this 0.15% threshold assumption is basically 1,000 euro per megawatt hour. This is the cap that we then applied for 2028 for the first target year, and afterwards, according to the behavior in the EOM, where we have basically an increase in the market cap as soon as the cap is hit. We also took this into account, so we have an increase over the time until 1,400 euro in 2035. This is the background on the second approach, and with this I close the topic of risk aversion modeling, and I will give back to Edwin, I believe.
Many thanks, Niels. Definitely a crucial feature of the entire ERA exercise, and good to share with everyone how this is being tackled in the complex ERA methodology. Also enriched, as you say, based on several years of ERA experience, but also the feedback we got from actual investors in the sector. For example, the survey we did recently for the ERA methodology refinement, which I trust is useful for everybody to be acquainted with. Thanks, Niels. I'm pretty sure this will also trigger some questions. In the meantime, we see some questions coming in already via the Slido. Also the topic Laura presented earlier, but as said, for the sake of time, we want to push through with all the topical interventions we had planned, and we'll take everyone's questions then at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, I pass over to Oscar to share some thoughts about how the other EVA approach is progressing at the moment. Over to you, Oscar. Thanks.
Yep, thank you, Edwin, for the presentation, and welcome everyone. In the next section, we are going to analyze or review which has been the improvements and the current situation of the revenue-based EVA approach and why we are testing in the current ERA study. So a bit of the background, we can see just the different topics. So why or which is the cause that we are studying this revenue-based EVA approach? Well, actually that study on the EVA has increased quite a lot in complexity over the last editions, and different costs in the EVA model leads to some simplifications in the study. That leads to a necessity or to the possibilities to analyze different approaches, and the revenue-based is one of them. So we can tackle different subjects as the reduction of the weather scenarios or the simulation of the forced outage. Based on that, on the context of the current ERA methodology, in Article 6.2, it's enabled the option to evaluate the EVA with a revenue-based assessment, and actually was already published in ERA 2024, a case study on that revenue-based EVA as a first study. The goal of that study is to reflect or to analyze the methodological option of that revenue base, which is available to that study, and assess the computational performance and limitations that we have to accommodate different elements beyond the cost-based EVA, as for instance, the number of weather scenarios that we can simulate with that approach. And in order to achieve the simulations, the approach right now is to develop a full revenue-based EVA simulation for the full pan-European perimeter built on the ERA 2024 model. So once having cleared the background of the model and the simulations, let's have a small recap on how that process works, and to have an idea on how this process is established and simulated. So in the next slide, we can see a small diagram which is summarized the process itself, iterative process that we run. So just as a general idea, we have to take into account that it's an iterative process in which we evaluate the missing money of each individual unit that we have in the system, in the whole European system. So it's quite a detailed analysis based on an iterative process that we are able to analyze individually and to modify, as it is not really a black box. So going into detail into the diagram, we can see that we have an initial system of the initial system, which is the one we have already with the information that we have, plus an investment candidates or unit that we want to analyze if are able to be developed and built in the following target years. Once we have that first saturated system, let's say like that, we run a market simulation with a unit commitment with hourly data, and we get that unit's revenue for each individual unit from the initial state, initial system, and the investment candidates, and we can compute which is the EBITDA for all that units and compare it to the fixed cost. Once we make that comparison, we can evaluate the missing money for each individual unit. If the units are profitable, so there is no missing money, they will go back to the system and stays in the system. And if not, it will be evaluated by the algorithm if they should stay in the system or not, based on how far they are from being profitable. Once that system has been modified, we go back to the initial point, so the market simulation. We run again a second iteration. We obtain the revenues of each unit, calculate the EBITDA, compare it to the fixed cost, and we continue that iterative process until we get to the final system in which it is optimal with the units that are profitable. All of them are profitable, but are expanded the units that are possible to be expanded. So all of them are close to equilibrium. That's the base idea behind the simulation, but we have to take into account that that simulation will only work for one target year. But as that simulation, that study spans for 10 years, we have to accommodate that logic to an iterative loop to take into account the time variable in that sense. So in the next slide, we can see how we take into account that time variable. As we want to analyze for a time span of 10 years normally, and we are not capable of simulating each individual year, we are going to set up to select only 4 main target years. In that case, for example, we have 2026, 2028, 30, and 2035, which we are going to analyze individually and take decisions after each target year, which units we want to expand, decommission, mothball, or extend the lifetime of that unit. So as we can see in the first target year, 2026, we are going to analyze the whole future, so between 2026 and 2035. But as we move forward on time, the target years of the years that we are going to simulate are decreasing as our horizon just goes up to 2035. Taking that into account, if we go to 2026, for instance, we will analyze the same loop as we did before, as we showed before, for each year that we're going to analyze in the future. So in that case, 26, 28, 30, 35, we're going to perform the iterations in each main year, and we will get a final optimal system based on the decisions that we're going to take in 2026. Based on the results, it's going to be computed the EBITDAs and the net present values of the units, and it's going to be taken in some decisions in order to expand some units or the commission or the decisions that we want to take into each unit. So again, that the analysis is done unit by unit, and with also the possible expansion candidates. Then we will move forward in the future. We will perform the same analysis, moving, let's say, ourselves to the future, to 2028, reanalyze, we reassess the next target years, and again, take decisions that will go forward to 2030 and 2035. So in that case, we can, based on the initial loop iterative process that we saw before, replicate the decisions that the investors will take in each target year moving forward up to 10 years in the future. Just mention that this process has been developed internally, so it's not a black box. It can be modified and include other cost streams in order to simulate more accurately different revenues that can appear in the future or for different technologies. Last but not least, in the next slide, we will see the current situation and the developments that has been introduced in ERA 2025 revenue-based compared to the case study of ERA 2024. So first of all, it has improved the decision-making logic, as we saw before, reviewing the methodological choices in order to obtain a system closer to economic equilibrium. That means that in the iterative process, the logic behind of which units should remain in the system for the next iteration has been refined in order to reach that convergence or reach that optimal system in a more accurate way and more efficiently. Also, it has been validated the computational performance and limitations that exist in the current infrastructure in order to accommodate new features. In that case, for instance, increasing the number of weather scenarios can run in parallel, so it doesn't require more computational time, but it requires more computational power, which is a limitation that we have to take into account and to tackle for future editions. Also, as we saw before, as it is an iterative process, that algorithm has been analyzed and optimized in order to find the settings in order to reach that convergence in a reasonable time, so we can perform that simulations in a time span that fits in the schedule and reaching an optimal solution, which makes it viable. And also, as has been mentioned before, it is really important to have a consistency between EVA and ED models, and that revenue-based approach will enable that process takes the same model as a base model. Has been validated the consistency between both models, as in ERA 2024, some elements were not considered or were simplified in order to make it computationally more efficient. But in this edition, it's been investigated all the options to tackle or that simplification that has been done in the past. So that's currently the situation on the developments on the revenue-based EVA. And with this recap, I guess we'll give back the floor to Edwin for the final conclusions and questions. Thank you.
Many thanks, Oscar, for sharing some views on how the revenue-based EVA is progressing also for ERA 2025. Again, a topic heavily discussed and anticipated in previous eras, so good to see how progress is being made, and I appreciate any views on this topic as well. So let's make best use of the time we still have available, because we still want to close as planned around 12 o'clock, of course. So thanks already to all the presenters from ENTSO and ENTSO E for their concise presentations. Now we go to the part which you can impossibly prepare for, but at least we see some good inspiration already via the Slido. So taking a look at some of the questions some of you have been asking, and if any questions still comes up also for what Oscar just presented, by all means do still put them into the Slido chat, of course. I think one of the questions which got most traction so far is one that you just presented, Oscar, on the revenue-based EVA. If you could again elaborate on the revenue streams used for all each units to evaluate the missing money problem. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So right now we are taking into account the net revenues that we obtained from the day-ahead market in the simulations from the hourly dispatch. It's also been taken into account. Well, yeah, that's the day-ahead market. It's the one which are taken into account for that simulations.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Okay, perhaps also to keep it a bit in order of the presentations we had so far, I go to some questions which were addressed to you, Laura, when you presented on the weather scenario selection. So on some questions, already some comments, some reactions were given in writing already. So I hope that helps to the person who asked those questions, and many thanks to that. Something about the spread of the 6 weather scenarios and how averages, or as you say, the Wasserstein averages were being used. One interesting question that also came up was about if you could explain or elaborate a bit further how the weather scenario selection methodology relates to the one that is also being used in the T1EP product. And thanks to the person who asked the questions to compare both products, of course. But Laura, if you could expand a bit on that one, many thanks.
Yeah, I can do that, of course. Yeah, the goal is different in both studies. So in TYNDP, the clustering related more to selecting different representative hour of the power system situations. And that's the reason why other methodology has to be implemented there, while in the EVA, so in ERA, regarding the EVA, we are focusing of getting yearly, so weather scenarios that are representative for the yearly net revenue. So we have to consider that there are opposite goals, or not opposite, but different goals that we have here in both studies for the selection.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Many questions still about the weather scenario selection. I'm not sure if it catches most attention or because it was the first topic we presented. But again, a question that came up and which some people reacted to is if, Laura, if you could again elaborate a bit on how the weights of the weather scenarios were selected. I think it's important for people to appreciate and understand in a nutshell. Thank you.
Yeah, so the approach that we are using, so this impact-based approach, actually it aims at finding the most representative subset of weather scenario, being the selected weather scenarios actually equally weighted. So that is what we are trying to look at. So we are not like searching for weights also when selecting the weather scenarios, the most representative weather scenarios, but we are calculating the most representative equally weighted weather scenarios.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I hope that gives some more insight on the question to the person who asked this. Again, if anyone has any question, please keep it going, of course, if you don't have sufficient time. But if you do indicate your affiliation, your name, at least we have a chance to get back to you afterwards. But many thanks already for all the remarks shared so far. I perhaps pivot then to the second presentation given by Niels on the investor behavior itself. An interesting question from Hannes from Uniper. Is my understanding correct that prices above the cap are not considered in the EVA? Would investors take this unlikely event into account? How is that being tackled in the model itself? If you could elaborate a bit on that, Niels. Thanks.
Yeah, it's correct. So in the investment decision, the very low likelihood events are not taken into account as they occur, but they are instead taken into account with the reduced price cap. So we don't see this very extreme prices of 5,000 euro, but we still see the reduced price cap in the scarcity hour of between 1,000 and 1,400 euro in the EVA simulation.
Thanks, Niels. I hope it also addresses some of the questions we had earlier in the presentation that Laura gave about how, if I can call it like that, outliers and weather scenarios are being covered in the EVA itself. Of course, both approaches hang a bit together, but if still listening to all the presentations, if there's any questions still about how investor for outliers is taken into account, happy to receive them still. Perhaps I pivot then to a question to your presentation, Oscar, on the revenue-based approach. It's a question from Anatole Destieux asking, for the revenue-based approach, investment decommissioning in 2030 will impact the NPVs for assets in the system in 2026. How is this issue being tackled? If you could expand a bit on the assumptions we took here. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. So we go 1 second to the previous slide so we can have an example there. So as we mentioned before, we simulate each target year individually, and we make decisions in the future. So let's say that we calculate in 2026. So we move ourselves, let's say, to 2026, and we evaluate the future with the information that we have available in 2026. In that case, we make some decisions, we expand or not units, and then we move forward. But the decisions that are taken in the future doesn't affect the past in that sense. So we are trying to replicate the reality of the investors that are taking in real life, let's say somehow. It's not trying to optimize the whole system, but to replicate the logic of the investors. So yeah, and unit that is built or decommissioned in 2030 will affect the calculations, let's say, that has been taken in the past, but you take the decisions that you make the decisions that you have that you do with the information that you have at each being time. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's the logic that is behind the iterative loop.
Super. Thanks, Oscar, for elaborating on that one. And indeed, if it triggers any reaction, I'm pretty sure on this topic there will be more questions to come as we progress. And once the ERA 2025 is being published, by all means, don't hesitate to come back on this point to whoever asked this question or has any questions on this topic as well. I see at the moment no new questions coming in immediately, and also some responses already given in writing. So I hope it was already helpful to all of you who posed those questions. Looking also at the time, I think it's also opportune to come to a closure of the webinar. So let's talk about the next steps then, if we can move forward. So next steps, essentially, it's about what you can expect next to come and where you can connect with us in the months to come. As you hopefully understood from the presenters here today, the ERA 2025 work is progressing well. Also, thanks to all the responses we got from all of you on the input data consultation we had before summer, which allowed us to update the data package, calibrate the models, and get the first test runs going. As you can imagine, we're already about end of summer. We're in full crunch mode to finalize the ERA runs in the months to come. So it's still our ambition to launch the ERA 2025 publication this side of Christmas, which will be an interesting set of months for the expert teams working hard on this topic. Definitely, you can expect a dissemination around the time the ERA 2025 is being published. For the moment, there are no next webinars foreseen in the immediate months to come. But again, if any of you have any questions about anything you heard today or you haven't heard today and you're interested about it, please do connect to us so we can at least can have a conversation and take your guidance as well on this point to go forward. An immediate next step, again, I take the opportunity to make some advertisement for a next webinar we've scheduled today, which talks about the ERA methodology amendments for next eras to come. If you haven't done so yet and you're interested in this topic, how ERA can evolve beyond ERA 25-26, by all means, do dial in for this one as well. I hope you are aware of an ongoing consultation on our proposal for the ERA methodology amendment itself, which closes next week already. As we're coming close to 12 o'clock, all that rests me is to, again, thank all of you for your continued interest in the ERA itself. I see some names who have been connecting to us, connecting to our webinars for the past years already. Thanks for your continued interest. It shows the importance of the product. Thanks also to everyone who dialed in for the first time. And again, if you have any questions or you would like to reach out to any of the experts you heard here today, by all means do so. And lastly, of course, many thanks to all the presenters from ENTSO E and Acer who took the time to share some thoughts in today's event. Many thanks to all of you. And this being said, we can close today's webinar. And I wish you all an excellent rest of the day and hope to see you all soon in person or virtually. Many thanks. Have a good day. Bye-bye.